What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to our next top 10 positional breakdowns video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this safety class. Before we get started, I want to remind you, you can get access to my full draft rankings on my Patreon. You'll get even more information on these 10 players. If anyone makes the cut that you want to know about, I've got 23 safeties evaluated and growing, all up there on my draft board. See what I think about them and all 250 players that I've done to this point. You'll get exclusive film breakdowns. We just did one on Kyle Hamilton, who we'll talk about in this video. We've got team-specific 7-round mock drafts coming for all 32 teams as we lead up to the draft. So if you enjoy my draft content, you will love my Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. You'll support my channel as well, above all. If nothing else, please do hit that like button. It helps push this video out to other draft enthusiasts like you. Make sure you subscribe. We've got more top 10 videos, sleeper videos, my guys videos, as well as my live stream on the night of the draft. On all 3 days of the draft, we'll have highlights, live reactions, you name it. So set your calendars, subscribe, and come back for more great draft content. But without further ado, let's get into this top 10 safeties class. And I do have one note before we start talking about these players is, I think draft analysis, and I'm guilty of it as well, but I think in general we can get a little bit too rosy, a little bit too optimistic, ride the hype train a little bit too much. And this is a group of safeties that I've seen a ton of hype on. And I just want to make sure I'm doing a good job of, when I can't match that hype, I try to temper your expectations a little bit. And without killing the vibe here, I will say I don't think it's a great year if you need a safety, especially if you need that like day one impact. I think there's a lot of hype for this class because there are some total freaks with a lot of upside. But I think we're using our imagination a little bit too much on how early a lot of these guys are going to make that impact. So that's something I'm going to try to sort through as we get into it. But let's start with my number 10 safety, someone that, was way down the board, was like the 20th guy I got to. I tend to go in order of sort of the consensus rankings, if you will. So this is definitely going to be a sleeper and definitely a my guy here. But as I was doing safeties 13 through 19, I got to Quentin Lake and I said, this guy is just better than the last like 6 guys I've done. It was just so evident by his tape. And then I did the 4 or 5 guys after him, and he was way better than those guys. So with Quentin Lake, he's not the fastest guy. He's pretty quick, but he's not the quickest guy. He's definitely not the strongest or most physical guy. But what became evident about Quentin Lake is his IQ and his ability to anticipate what's coming his way. And when you're going through all of these later round safeties, so often you're just frustrated because they don't understand route combinations. They don't understand the body language or tendencies of the receivers they're going to be seeing, and they just play slow, and frankly, they just don't cover. They just kind of play safe and, again, lack that anticipation. Not Quentin Lake. You can tell he puts his time in the film room. He understands the body language of receivers coming his way and what they might be running. He understands route combinations of what his opponent likes to run. He understands what his own defender's assignments are, so he knows when he can gamble and move and cover guys. It sounds so simple, right? But again, when you watch 23 safeties, there's so many guys in this class that just don't play with the IQ that Quentin Lake does. So I would actually make the argument that Quentin Lake is the highest IQ, high zone defender in this entire draft. I think there's one safety that is proven to have to be a smarter overall player, but he is more of a slot player, and we'll talk about him towards the top of this list. But I think when you look at how many safeties in this class run 4.3, Quentin Lake's anticipation and zone IQ are actually a little bit harder to find than speed in this draft class. So he's my guy in this class. I think he's going to be a day one impact, at least as a quality backup as he gets up to speed with the NFL, but I don't think it's going to take him long at all. His father played in the NFL for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's now a defensive backs coach. This is a guy that grew up around an NFL locker room. He's not going to be kind of thrown off by all of the work you got to put in. He's not going to be starstruck. He's going to come in day one. He's a super high like character dude off the field as well. So he's going to come right into a locker room and just fit in as your backup safety immediately. I do like him in, more hybrid split safety defenses where you can put him in a lot of quarters coverages. I think that's where he shows his best work, kind of those zone match situations where he can communicate and understand breaking points and squeeze routes and all that stuff. I think he has the range to play cover 2. He actually looked really good in cover 2 at UCLA. That's where those high zone instincts really came in. I don't love him as a single high free safety. So if you run a lot of cover 3 and you have that true free safety, I don't know if that's the right scheme for you, but he can do it occasionally, and he can rotate down as well into a buzz zone. He's not the most physical, dominant run defender either. He's more of a sort of tactical technician of a cover safety than he is this physically imposing run defender. But again, I think you're getting a player that can be a quality backup immediately if you want depth. Think of a team like Buffalo, for example. Like if anything happened to Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, he has very similar qualities to those players. So, or like Green Bay, the Rams, they all run that sort of Fangio split safety defense. So he can give you day one depth. And I do think he can impress enough with his locker room tendencies to ascend to being a starting player. I compare him to Tashawn Gibson, who had that growth and became a 10-year starter in the NFL, just a quality player. So that's my Quentin Lake sales pitch. I believe in the character and the football IQ that he showed compared to a lot of deeper safeties in this group. Let's move on to number 9. And it's Brian Cook out of Cincinnati. I don't have quite as much to say about Brian Cook really at all. He's generally a top 10 safety for most people, and I think he's a pretty safe projection as a box strong safety. He has the size to do it. He plays very physical against the run. He takes good angles. He doesn't really give up those backside cutbacks too much or undercut his pursuit angles, giving up big runs. Like he's a very good run defending safety. He's a good, not great athlete. He has some speed questions. I don't think we really saw great top speed on tape. We didn't get a 40 time from him. So, he's going to have to answer some of that if he's going to be this high end cover safety at the next level. And I don't really expect him to be that. But he's a very sound tackler. And played for a defense in Cincinnati that required a lot of toughness and discipline. And I think he can come in and compete for a starting strong safety role immediately. I just don't know if he's going to ever be a high upside player. I feel pretty good saying that he won't. I compare him to Chuck Clark, who came in as a backup, a late round pick for the Baltimore Ravens, but on the right team that could buy into his work ethic and his tackling and physicality as more of a box safety. He really thrived. So I think Brian Cook can have a similar trajectory and become a starter in the NFL. I just don't see him as a super high upside, explosive safety either. But then our next safety is the literal opposite. JT Woods out of Baylor. Think like a Madden god. Like if you could use this guy as your free safety in Madden, this is going to be the guy you want. In real life, I'm not entirely sure that you're going to get that sort of play. He is a speed demon, a track star. He's got 4.3 speed, and it shows when he triggers and feels good about something, or he's chasing down a running back from the backside of the play. Like you can see that 4.3 speed. That is not a fluke. So it's good to know it's there and he can hit that top speed in pads, because some guys and even some players in this class, they ran 4.3, but you don't get to see it on tape. JT Woods, you at least did get to see it. The other nice thing about him is he's long, and I don't know if he has a former receiver background or what, but you can tell he's got really good ball skills. And when the ball's in the air, he attacks it and he comes down with it more often than not. If he can anticipate that play. But that is the problem. Literally the opposite of Quentin Lake. Like, he just doesn't really care about the consequences of like what he decides to do, is the best way to describe it. Like, he's very aggressive. He's gonna make some plays from free safety, but he had more busted coverage out of anybody in this top 10 video. Like, he would just see something and go, and sometimes he would guess right, but most of the time he wouldn't. And there was a lot of times where, whoops, that dig just flew over the top of my head, or that backside post, whoops, like totally forgot to cover that. And it's a concern. Like, you have got to coach this guy up to better understand like what the consequences of his actions are as a free safety. And he's not a strong safety. He's really lanky. He looks like a kind of deep threat wide receiver, if you know what I'm talking about. Like, he just doesn't move like laterally all that well when he picks up in man coverage. He's just very tight. So I don't like him in a strong safety alignment at all. I think he has to play really free safety for a team that likes to run a lot of cover 3 or a lot of cover 1. I compare him to Tavarius Moore, who went in the 3rd round, who ran a really good 40 time, but just hasn't been able to figure everything out at the next level. I think it's a pretty good comp. Like Tavarius Moore, JT Woods also really struggles at the tackle point, just doesn't break down very well. Again, doesn't change gears. So a simple juke move or a step inside, and JT Woods just gonna fly right past you. He does have stopping power, like he can hit you hard, but he just doesn't connect all that often. So there's just so much work to do there with JT Woods. I was genuinely pretty underwhelmed by his tape, but when you have a guy that can run that fast, it's just worth gambling on because he seriously could have elite range over the top. So that is JT Woods out of Baylor. He's going to be one of those guys that gets some excitement going in this draft class. Okay, then we have Kirby Joseph out of Illinois. He's an interesting player. He's got really long 33-inch arms. I think he changes directions and accelerates in short areas very well. We don't have a 40 time for him or a 10-yard split, but just on tape, that kind of acceleration, those first couple steps are really good. And with those long arms, he's a really good like hands guy. He can break up balls. He can swat at the receiver's arms. It's good like makeup speed in short areas that he really thrives with. So that's kind of his best trait, and that's why I actually like him better down in the box. I don't think he has the best long speed, probably somewhere in the 4 or 5 range if we did get a 40 time for him. But if you bring him down into the box, I think that arm length and his ability to kind of accelerate and make up in short areas really well is going to thrive. The problem is he has played almost none of that at Illinois. So that's an example in this class of a guy that the upside is there. He's got the size to play strong safety. I think he's a really good tackler. I think in the little glimpses we saw, he used his length well to get off blocks, and he can man up tight ends and stuff, something he's going to have to do a lot more of if asked to play strong safety as opposed to free safety that he did so much of at Illinois. But again, that day one impact, it's just a little bit more unclear because it's not something he was asked to do at Illinois. So that's the projection there with Kirby Joseph. I definitely think 3rd, 4th round, he's worth the pick, even if it might take a year for him to get used to a different role at the next level. But overall, he's a smart player with good athletic traits and definitely starting upside with the right coaching and to be pointed in the right direction. I just don't know if his biggest strengths are best utilized as a true free safety. And now number 6 is Nick Cross, who is another kind of give him a year type of safety, honestly. He's a junior coming out and just very unrefined. Didn't really know what he was looking at. Was used in a lot of different positions, but a guy that has a ton of size and definitely projects well as a strong safety. He could even maybe put on 5 pounds and play linebacker at 6 foot 220, but he is your kind of moldable ball of clay in this class. He really lacks that anticipation. He can really give up a lot of ground in man coverage when, receivers have a little bit of wiggle. He gets lost really quickly. He just doesn't really know what's coming. I think from a deep zone, he's entirely conservative. You didn't see him really show those instincts or the confidence to trigger in coverage. So that's just stuff you got to coach out of him. This is a guy with 4.3 speed at 215 pounds, 6 feet. He's only 21 years old. Like, there's no denying the upside here, and there were flashes. Absolutely. He's got some nice plays on the ball, some good plays in run defense, but it's just all very inconsistent. So someone that will probably need to contribute on special teams in year one. Luckily, in his case, he can be a dominant special teamer because he's got 4.3 speed and likes to hit. So, he can cover kicks and learn your defense, and maybe by year 2, year 3, he can get there. Definitely kind of your traits-based developmental style prospect. I don't think you want him on the field early on, but a really intriguing prospect nonetheless. And now number 5 is someone that I think I'm just a little bit lower on, and that's Lewis Cine out of Georgia, who's getting a ton of buzz right now. He's getting put in a lot of first-round mock drafts at this point in time, and I totally see the upside. He's tied for the second highest upside grade of anyone in this class, and his highlight tape is exciting. You can see the pursuit speed. It's real. The 4.3 speed, again, like we said with Woods, it's very much there. He pops you. He's made a couple nice plays on the ball. You know he's got that range and that speed that everyone's looking for. And unlike JT Woods, Lewis Cine's got really good tackling ability. He's not coming up and missing a bunch of tackles. He comes downhill and finishes. So that's why he is a lot higher than a guy like JT Woods, but similar problems where he just does not really anticipate what's in front of him. And there was a real lack of coverage ability on his film that honestly bothered me, but at the same time, it's another one of these point the finger at Georgia's coaching staff thing, because I think they had this unbelievable front seven, right? They were getting pressure at an ungodly level. And I think with Lewis Cine, with his speed and his ability to come downhill and be a secure tackler, I really think they said, just stay deeper than the deepest, right? Don't really worry about jumping posts and jumping in routes and being a playmaking free safety. Just, when you see the run, go get it. But if it's a pass, just drop really deep and don't let guys over the top. And that's what he did. He did his job at Georgia damn well. But again, like Devontae Wyatt, like Nakobe Dean, I think some of these guys are going to work out at the next level because they'll be asked to do more and they'll be able to handle it. And some of these guys, I think, played a very specific role at Georgia and are going to get a little bit overrated. It's hard to know exactly how it's going to play out, but man, there's a lot of projection to do here with Lewis Cine. He gives up a ton of space on, if he's in quarters or he's in cover 2 and he's got a corner route coming or there's a guy running up the seam or down the sideline, he's really not going to get it at all. And when he ends up in man coverage, the complete opposite of Quentin Lake, he doesn't really read what's coming at all. He waits for the break and then he runs. And he ends up leaving a lot of unnecessary space there. So I really was underwhelmed by the coverage ability of Lewis Cine. I love the speed. I love the tackling ability. I love his mentality at the position. I think he has a good free safety mentality. He just needs to speed up that processing power so he can actually be a cover player at the next level. And I think he can get there, but I'm not really spending a first round pick at safety for that. I might regret saying this, but give me JT Woods in the 4th round than Lewis Cine in the 1st. Lewis Cine in the 2nd round, absolutely. But my low-end comp for him is Sean Davis, who I believe was a first-round pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had all these athletic traits, but just couldn't put it all together from a coverage perspective. My high-end comp for him is Marcus May, really speedy, free safety with good tackling ability. I think he falls in that spectrum. So I like him. People are just, I think, getting a little bit too far with him that I just can't really match, because I don't think we saw a lot of great coverage ability from him on his tape. And that does put Jaquan Brisker just ahead of him, also with a second to a third round grade. And honestly, just a completely different position anyway. So that's another thing with safety here, is it's different styles, different positions, honestly. And Brisker and Scene are just entirely different, like, fits. Brisker to me is more of a true strong safety, or a rotational safety, not in the sense of being a backup, but in the sense of, can you rotate up and down, cover two, quarters, buzz zones? That's more Jaquan Brisker, whereas Lewis Cine, I want, playing center field most of the game. But Brisker is really comfortable around the box. He is a much smarter player than Lewis Cine. He can squeeze routes and man coverage much better. He has better feel against tight ends, for example, slot receivers even. I like his athleticism and his length to be able to especially be a tight end matchup guy, but I do think he can hang with slot receivers maybe a little bit more than, say, a Cook, who we talked about out of Cincinnati. Range is I really wasn't overly impressed by what we saw from him in more high zone looks. I thought he was pretty conservative in those situations and didn't play with the same energy and go get it mentality that he had more around the line of scrimmage. He definitely can thump. He gets off blocks. Needs to improve his strike zone, his accuracy as a tackler. He had some missed tackles on tape. But for the most part, I like him as a potential starter, as a kind of do-it-all safety in a lot of ways, just not a high zone free safety type. So my comp for him is Tracy Walker, who just got a second contract with the Detroit Lions, was a mid-round pick, just like I expect Brisker to be. Maybe going to take a little bit of time to truly earn that starting job, but I think he can get there and be a really good starter in the NFL. And now my number 3 safety, Jalen Petrie out of Baylor. And I mentioned with Quentin Lake, there's one other player in this class that I think is a smarter player than Quentin Lake, and I think that's Jalen Petrie. Now, different roles entirely. Petrie was effectively a slot corner for Baylor. Played a little bit of strong safety, but for the most part, he was coming out as that star defender, which is essentially a slot corner or a third safety in a lot of packages. And I think that's still going to be his best projection at the next level, because that's where he's super comfortable. And I told this story in the Fully Inflated Football podcast, but I was getting through one of his games, sitting next to my wife, getting ready for bed. She had already started drifting off, and he had some play. I don't even remember which one it was, but I just said audibly out loud, "Holy this guy's good." Like, he just popped. You just don't see players with the playmaking instincts that he has. It's reminiscent of, say, a Desmond King back when he had like 6 interception seasons for the Chargers, or just those corners that just, and strong safeties that just see it and go and make stuff happen. He does it in the run as a blitzer, that he even had to end up like manning up, squaring up against tight ends and offensive tackles as an edge defender, because Baylor wouldn't match personnel, and he'd have to come up against 2 tight end packages and defend the run up front. And he showed the play strength and willingness to do that. He has incredible quickness to man up not just tight ends, but slot receivers. I think there's only one other safety in this class that we haven't done yet that will be better manning up against slot receivers. He has plenty of quickness and route anticipation to squeeze those routes, and he has good speed to keep up with them as well. But what really shines is what we were mentioning, that intermediate zone IQ. and just ability in intermediate zones. So like he'll drop to his spot, and if someone threatens right away, he can tighten that gap immediately and pick stuff up and anticipate those route combinations on short route concepts. But if nothing's coming his way right away, his head is on a swivel and he is looking for work, and he understands, like, he's patient enough to know if a dig is coming behind him or something, because his head's on a swivel. If no one's there, he'll look and see that outside receiver start his break, and he's like, okay, that dig is coming over me, I gotta get depth, and he does that quickly. But if nothing is an impending threat to his zone, he's gonna find work, and he is just an annoying middle of the field defender. And that's where I want him playing at the next level. Whether that's strong safety or slot corner, or maybe you're the Rams or one of these defenses that has an actual star role. Now, they're not going to take Jalen Ramsey out of there to, put Jalen Petrie in there, but maybe Seattle, who's adapting this defense, Minnesota, who's adapting this defense. I think he can do a lot of the stuff that Jalen Ramsey does for the Rams. And I don't put that lightly, but in that role, I really like what he can do there. I do compare him to Jordan Whitehead. He's not Jalen Ramsey. And I don't think he's going to be this great free safety either, though who knows? If asked to do it, we really didn't get to see him play a lot of cover three, if any, from a true free safety assignment. I think he could probably get up to speed on that kind of stuff, but day one, he can be one of the best slot defenders in the NFL immediately. So that slot tag definitely gets a bad rap, and we haven't seen the NFL truly invest in that at a high level. I think that's maybe something that'll catch up in time. But that is why I have a second round value on him. If you wanted to take him in the end of the first because you have a very good role for him in your defense, though, like we talked about, I can totally get behind that. It's just a little bit harder to find the perfect fit there. But top of the second, absolutely is one of the 50 best players in this class, and one of the better day one impacts in this class as well. Just a super smart, high floor player. And now my number two safety, which, it's not going to be a surprise for those that have been following me on Twitter and listening to the podcast and all of this stuff. But if you're new here, this is probably going to come as a surprise, and it might throw you off, but at least hear me out, and then you can leave the video after that if you still hate me. But Kyle Hamilton is my number two safety in this draft. I was very underwhelmed watching Kyle Hamilton, given the hype and expectations that he's supposed to be a blue chip defender, that he is potentially the best player in this class. Not only do I strongly disagree that he is the best player in this class or in the same breath as a lot of the top players in this class, but I have serious questions on if he can return the upside of a top 10, even potentially a top 20 pick. Now, I do still have a first round grade on him. I think he does some really unique stuff very, very well. He has rare length. He's 6'4". He has wingspan, 33-inch arms, and he's quick and has, to me, his best trait other than his length is his reaction time. When he sees something, his body responds like spider senses. And that's why I compare him to Spider-Man, because he has arms like webs and he has reflexes like Spider-Man. But, Spider-Man, not the fastest of the Avengers. Stupid comp, I get it. There's no 6'4", 220-pound safeties to truly compare Kyle Hamilton to, unless you think he's going to be maybe like Jaron Kearse, which maybe he will be. But I do think his reflexes are going to make him a better player than that, because the way I describe it is when he's dropping into a zone or he's in pursuit to the sidelines or he's blitzing, he is able to cast webs over the offense, whether it's to get his arms in a passing lane or to wrap up a ball carrier running to the sideline. It's a unique trait that he has, and if used in the overhang portion of the field or even as a weak side linebacker or a bandit linebacker in a big nickel defense, or even in that star role that we talked about a little bit with Jalen Petre, he's going to be a menace over the middle of the field. He's extremely aggressive. Sometimes it gets him beat, but for the most part, in a mid-zone assignment, you're going to be able to protect his aggressiveness from hurting you for big plays, unlike from a free safety assignment or from a quarters assignment from too high. If he's a linebacker or a slot corner and he's gambling, more often than not, it's not going to lead to these massive coverage busts and 50-yard touchdowns. So I don't mind him being aggressive from that part of the field. But there are some significant weaknesses in Kyle Hamilton's game that to me hold him back from being a top 10 player in this class, from being someone that already at a position of lessened value. I don't see him as a top 10 pick in this draft. I would have a hard time finding the right fit and the right, to justify drafting a guy that's, kind of a role player for your defense that early. So his issues for me are, above all, he's just not an athletic man cover player against slot receivers. Pretty much any time he had to turn and run and cover any sort of deep concept from the slot, whether it was a corner route or a seam route or a post route, he just couldn't keep up with slot receivers. He couldn't do it. And also as a deep zone defender, his range is some of the most overrated stuff in this class, because there's the week 1 play against Florida State where he's in a too high shell on the opposite side of the field. The quarterback's rolling to the opposite side and, he releases it late. Hamilton sees where he wants to go with the ball and he's able to get to a full sprint to arrive and make a great play on the ball. It's a hell of a play, but the reality is the more you watch of him, that range was never to be found again. And to me, that speaks to his anticipation and his instincts. It does not necessarily speak to his speed. So he ran about a 4.6 40 at the combine, and I think that's legitimate for him. When he can get to top speed, it's surely good enough to have decent range. But even then, the top speed's not all that great. You see a lot of times in run and chase situations where, he takes really bad angles. He undercuts it thinking he's faster than he is. And at least 3 times on the season, big runs against him for the opponent that were his fault, really, for taking bad angles, thinking he's faster than he is, not being able to keep up from behind or from a free safety alignment. You see him just not able to get there in time. So there's the one play against Florida State that shows his ability, to really get those long legs going. You can see him eat up a lot of ground in a short amount of time, but he just so rarely gets to play at that speed, and his change of direction, especially when flipping vertical, is not very good at all. So I want him around the box, and that comes into the kind of specific role argument. Is he a weak side linebacker? You got to have the right fit for him. The last thing I'll say about him is, for this guy that's 6'4", 220 pounds, that's going to have to be a strong safety, I was pretty underwhelmed by his run defense. You would expect him to be stacking and shedding against tight ends and slot receivers and being a bully in the run game, and he really wasn't. He is not bad against the run, but given what he could be, I think he could play with a lot more effort and especially arm strength to shed blocks. Something he's going to have to do if he's going to return value as a top 10 pick, especially for a strong safety. So I have some issues with Kyle Hamilton, but I still think he's somebody you can draft in the first round if you have the right role and can direct those rare tools he has in the right direction. But he's not my number 1 safety in this class, and frankly, it's not all that close. My number 1 safety is Daxton Hill. And I had Daxton Hill going 9th overall to the Denver Broncos in February. Got a ton of hate for it, but I'm going to stand here today and say I'd make that pick all over again if they still had that number 9 pick. And when he goes in the top 15 or the top 20 of this draft, just don't say I didn't warn you. This guy's upside is so much higher than anybody in this draft class. And you look in this draft, there's a player, Trayvon Walker for Georgia, getting a ton of hype. So much that people think he could go number 2 overall because of his testing numbers and his athletic upside. But he's a total projection, right? You're saying in a different role with different coaching, he's going to do this, this, and this different, and he's going to return value as a top 2 pick and become this monster. Yet nobody is doing that with Daxton Hill, who to me is on the field a better athlete relative to his peers than Trayvon Walker is. And the testing numbers are there to support that claim. But seriously, there aren't a lot of cornerbacks that have the speed and movement ability that Daxton Hill has. So that's just a starting point. Like, he has 4.3 speed that shows his ability to flip and change direction is absurd. His acceleration, whether he's moving backwards, sideways, or downhill, yes, from a free safety alignment that was on his tape, by the way, even though in limited sample sizes, because he was asked to play slot corner at Michigan. For whatever reason, in the Big Ten, a lot of run game, a lot of, throwing to tight ends and slot receivers, not a whole lot of, pushing the ball downfield. And I think Michigan said, you are our best defensive player on the back end. And in that star role from a slot corner position, mostly strong safety slot corner, that's where you're going to have the biggest impact. And that's what he did. Played a ton of press man coverage from the slot. So that's in his background now. But there are reps where he plays free safety. And there are reps where he plays strong safety. And you can tell that this guy has so much more in him. But I'm telling you, he can play free safety, and he can play it damn well. Now, of course, he didn't do a lot of it. There is going to be some projecting there, and he might not do it immediately at an elite level. In fact, I do have a lower impact grade on Daxton Hill, just below Kyle Hamilton, 73 to Hamilton's 74. But you know what? He can also come up and play in the slot just as he did at Michigan. We mentioned the man coverage ability. He showed enough in intermediate zones. I think he could have shown more. But against the run, incredibly impressive. Something that doesn't get mentioned enough when I talked about his athletic upside. Yeah, he's super fast, but his arm length is only 1/4 of an inch shorter than Kyle Hamilton's. So when you're talking about the ability to get off blocks and be a secure tackler and be an impact in the run, he did that very well. He's a dominant blitzer as well, and he's got those long arms to jump up and swat at throws to the flat as well. He is incredibly versatile, plays so fast. He has movement skills that you just don't find for defensive backs. And you know what this reminds me of a ton is Minkah Fitzpatrick, who played slot corner at Alabama. The Miami Dolphins drafted him and asked him to play that same role, and he was fine, but the second he moved to free safety, you saw the range and the playmaking ability and the change of a direction ability to flip and get to spots immediately thrive. And to me, that's what Daxton Hill is going to be at the next level. He is an incredibly versatile player, a pretty scheme-proof player, but someone that's going to be at his best from a free safety alignment, whether he's running cover 4 hybrid split safety defenses, where I think he's maybe the best fit, or as a single high free safety running cover 1 or cover 3. So I'm planting my flag on Daxton Hill. It's been planted, frankly, for a long time. When I watched these guys play, I was more excited about Daxton Hill than I was Kyle Hamilton. The consensus opinion for so long was Hamilton was a blue chip prospect, and at the time I disagreed with that, but the more and more I watch these guys, the more comfortable I am with this opinion. So there are my top 10 safeties video. Very curious to see what you guys think. I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, make sure you subscribe, come back for more draft content. Please do hit that like button. Check out the Patreon if you just can't get enough draft content here. There's plenty more for you on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Most of all, I just appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.